Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a reality that, well, for many, it stays hidden in plain sight, yet it's profoundly pervasive right here in the United States. Human trafficking and child sexual abuse. These aren't, distant problems happening somewhere else. They're deeply affecting individuals, families, and communities all across our nation.
That's right. They're right here.
To help us navigate these incredibly challenging and sensitive topics, we've looked at two comprehensive sources. Our first is a really detailed Wikipedia overview on human trafficking in the U.S., which gives us a broad look at the landscape. And then for a deep and frankly sobering look into the devastating aftermath, we'll be relying on a rapid evidence assessment from the University of Bedfordshire. That one focuses on the long-term impacts of child sexual abuse.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to give you a clearer understanding of these complex issues. We're going to try and dissect the nuanced definitions, expose the different forms of exploitation, reveal the staggering human and societal costs, and importantly, shed light on the pathways to resilience and recovery that are actually possible. This deep dive, we hope, will equip you with the essential insights you need to understand a crisis that's, well, it's often overlooked, but really demands our collective attention.
Okay, so let's unpack this. When we talk about human trafficking, it's absolutely vital to clarify what it actually is, because, it often gets confused with something else.
Right, smuggling.
Exactly. Our sources draw a crystal clear line between human trafficking and human smuggling. Smuggling is mostly about illegally crossing borders, often with the person's consent, right? But trafficking, at its core, it's about coercion. It's about forcing or defrauding or, tricking someone into labor or commercial sex acts. It's fundamentally about control and exploitation. It doesn't even matter if a border was crossed or not.
That's a really crucial distinction to make. Here in the U.S., the problem mainly shows up in two forms: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And you have federal agencies like Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and the FBI. They're on the front lines gathering data, working to combat these things. They give us critical insights into the scale and the nature of it all.
Let's focus first on sex trafficking. It's important to recognize the strong international stance against it. The UN General Assembly's Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Persons, it doesn't pull any punches. It states pretty unequivocally that prostitution and the accompanying evil of the traffic in persons for the purpose of prostitution are incompatible with the dignity and worth of the human person.
A very strong statement.
It's powerful, a declaration of human dignity. But here's the deeply disturbing reality our sources reveal. The commercial sexual exploitation of children is a massive, often hidden part of this crisis. The numbers are just heartbreaking. In 2003 alone, 1,400 minors were arrested for prostitution. And get this, shocking, 14% of them were younger than 14.
Younger than 14, wow.
Yeah. And this isn't just some grim statistic. It really challenges how our justice system often sees and responds to these cases, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It suggests that many kids involved in prostitution aren't perpetrators to arrest, but they're actually deeply traumatized victims of trafficking.
Right. They need support, not prosecution.
Which highlights the urgent need for a shift towards victim support, not criminalization for these minors.
And if we look at the demographics within sex trafficking, the sources highlight different risk factors. Boys, for instance, they're identified as being at higher risk in places like agricultural work, the drug trade, petty crime, whereas girls disproportionately face higher risks in the sex industry and domestic work. It really underscores how exploitation can be, well, gendered. It preys on existing vulnerabilities.
Okay, so moving from sex trafficking to labor trafficking, we see a different but equally insidious set of vulnerabilities. So, who are the victims here? Our sources show they include U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, undocumented immigrants, and a particularly vulnerable group, foreign nationals on those temporary H-2A visas.
The agricultural visas.
Yeah, especially exploited within the agriculture sector.
Yeah.
How does this exploitation typically happen in labor trafficking?
Well, it's often this insidious web of manipulation. Victims are frequently subjected to threats of violence. That's common. But traffickers also cleverly leverage their victims' immigration status or lack thereof. They might seize passports or legal documents. A really common tactic is trapping workers in perpetual debt. They charge mandatory exorbitant fees for, transportation, housing, even communication sometimes.
Wow.
And it all gets deducted from their already meager pay. It just creates this cycle of debt that makes escape feel, well, impossible.
That system of H-2A visas is actually quite fascinating. There was a very unexpected detail in our sources about this. Yeah, while these visas are meant to provide benefits like housing and transport and a clear legal path, some accounts cited suggest this stark paradox. Undocumented people who come without any visas might actually have and this is a quote, greater chance to choose of where they wish to work and decide to leave the employment if they wish, and have a better chance of not being exploited.
That is counterintuitive, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
It suggests the very system designed to provide legitimate work pathways can, in practice, create a new kind of vulnerability, ironically giving less freedom than some who enter outside that legal framework.
It absolutely illustrates how, well-intentioned policies can sometimes have unforeseen negative consequences when they bump up against the realities of desperation and exploitation. It really exposes a complex loophole.
Yeah.
And speaking of surprising details, another one from the sources is Wisconsin's Melinda's Traveling Sales Crew Protection Act. Apparently, this is the only U.S. law specifically regulating these traveling sales crews.
The only one.
The only one mentioned. Yet, some groups actually opposed it, arguing it hampered entrepreneurial spirit.
Huh. That highlights that tension, doesn't it? Between protecting vulnerable people and concerns about economic freedom. Shows how even efforts to combat exploitation can face unexpected resistance.
Exactly.
So when we connect this back to broader vulnerabilities, particularly among, say, Latin American victims, what does our research show there?
It shows that factors like a lack of economic means, English fluency, and legal status make them incredibly susceptible, prime targets for labor trafficking across various sectors: agriculture, restaurants, domestic work, construction. And they're also specifically targeted for sex trafficking in places like bars, cantinas, escort services. A critical demographic insight here. 96% of potential sex trafficking victims from Mexico and Central America are female, and a staggering 63% are minors.
63% minors.
Yes. It clearly highlights the specific targeting of young girls in this horrific trade.
Okay, let's shift our deep dive now to the profound and often hidden long-term impacts of child sexual abuse, or CSA. We're drawing heavily here from that rapid evidence assessment from the University of Bedfordshire. The prevalence alone is truly stark. At least 1 in 14 adults, that's 7% in England and Wales, has been sexually abused as a child.
1 in 14.
And in the UK, 17% 11 to 17-year-olds reported experiencing sexual abuse.
These aren't just abstract numbers, They represent millions of lives irrevocably altered. Deep scars of trauma carried for years, often in silence.
And what's critical to understand here is the wide array of negative outcomes that victims and survivors often face, really across their whole lifespan.
Yeah.
When we look at emotional and mental health, the impacts are just devastating. CSA can lead to debilitating low self-esteem, a profound loss of confidence, severe mental health conditions.
Right.
The data is, well, it's chilling. 57% of young people who experience commercial sexual exploitation, or CSE, experience depression. 73% experience post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, that's severe anxiety triggered by trauma.
73%. Yeah. And the risk of CSA victims and survivors attempting suicide, it can be as much as 6 times greater than in the general population.
6 times.
And behaviors like self-harm, reported by up to 49% of adult survivors, and dissociation, that sense of detachment from reality. These are often, maladaptive coping mechanisms they develop just to survive the unbearable pain.
And the impacts aren't just emotional or mental, are they?
Yeah.
Our sources also talk about significant physical health consequences.
Exactly. Beyond any immediate physical injuries, there are clear links between CSA and long-term illnesses and disabilities. Our sources indicate 1 in 4 CSA victims reported a long-standing illness or disability compared to 1 in 5 of the general population. That's not a minor difference.
No.
Other health issues include higher BMI, sexually transmitted infections, chronic pain, problems affecting major organ systems, lungs, heart, liver, digestive, reproductive systems. And remarkably, the trauma isn't just psychological, it actually imprints physically. There's emerging neurobiological evidence showing that the extreme chronic stress from CSA can literally reshape the brain. Wow.
Yeah, altering its structure and function in measurable ways. This isn't just a metaphor for deep pain. It's a physiological toll that can impact everything from emotional regulation to cognitive processing for years.
You brought up externalizing behaviors earlier, which are so often profoundly misunderstood. People see them as character flaws when they're actually, like you said, desperate coping mechanisms. Can you elaborate on what these look like?
Absolutely. And they're often misunderstood. These are outward signs of internal distress. So, for example, substance misuse is common: nicotine, alcohol, illegal drugs. Some victims tragically become addicted before their teens, just trying to numb the pain.
So young.
Yeah. Then there are what the source calls risky sexual behaviors, things like early pregnancy, STIs, multiple partners, even sexual aggression sometimes, which can be a really complex response to prior abuse. And disturbingly, some victims become more likely to engage in offending behavior. They're 1.4 times more likely to have police contact, almost 5 times more likely to be charged with a criminal offense.
There's a powerful quote from a victim that really drives this home, highlighting the misinterpretation. Heavy drinking was not recognized early and picked up because young men are assumed to drink heavily in this Scottish culture.
So their cries for help just get ignored or misinterpreted.
Exactly, by a society that often doesn't understand the roots of these behaviors.
And beyond the individual, how does CSA impact interpersonal relationships?
Oh, profoundly. And across the lifespan. Victims and survivors often struggle significantly to form secure attachments. This leads to issues like poor relationship stability, an increased likelihood of experiencing or even perpetrating interpersonal violence, sexual dysfunction, and significant challenges in parenting. What's particularly poignant is how direct physical experiences, like pregnancy and childbirth for female victims and survivors, can be a significant trigger for trauma and emotional distress.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, tragically reactivating past pain during what should be a joyful bonding time.
And what does this all mean for society at large, beyond the individual and their relationships? The socioeconomic costs must be just immense.
They are staggering. Our sources highlight lower educational attainment for survivors, significantly higher unemployment rates, pervasive financial instability, even homelessness. This isn't just a personal tragedy. It becomes a substantial societal burden impacting community well-being, productivity.
Right.
To quantify this, the research states CSA costs the UK around £3 billion a year, and $2.7 billion of that is linked specifically to lost labor market productivity.
That's a huge economic hit just from productivity alone.
It is. But, those are just the economic figures, the direct financial cost. The estimated human and emotional cost, far harder to quantify, but arguably much more significant, is estimated at a staggering $38 billion annually in the UK.
$38 billion.
Yeah. This figure, as the sources emphasize, really highlights the substantial impact on both personal and societal levels. It reveals a crisis far beyond just the immediate financial stuff. It's a profound cost in terms of human potential, happiness, well-being.
Okay. Turning now towards, hopefully, some hope and healing. Let's explore the current U.S. legal and policy landscape, the stuff designed to combat trafficking and support victims. A cornerstone of this effort is the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, the TVPA, passed back in 2000. It defines trafficking, clearly distinguishes it from smuggling, encourages international prevention. However, I've read that its benefits can sometimes depend on the victim's cooperation with law enforcement. How does that actually play out, given the immense trauma we've just been discussing?
Yeah, that's a critical point. While the TVPA is groundbreaking, requiring victim cooperation can be a significant hurdle. I mean, imagine the fear, the distrust of authority, the psychological aftermath of enduring such trauma. It's incredibly difficult for many victims to immediately trust or provide detailed testimony.
Makes sense.
Which can unfortunately limit their access to crucial protections and benefits under the Act.
So what specific provisions are in place then to help these victims?
Well, the TVPA also established vital provisions like the T and U visas. These are specialized visas allowing victims of trafficking and certain other crimes to remain and work legally in the U.S. They can even lead to permanent residency, and there are special exceptions made for minors or those who've suffered severe trauma. So it's designed to offer a path to safety and stability.
Okay.
Additionally, we have safe harbor laws. These are crucial because they protect trafficking victims from being prosecuted for crimes committed while under the influence of trafficking crimes they were often forced into.
Right, like the prostitution arrest we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. These laws also ensure victims get essential services like counseling and housing. And states are strongly encouraged to pass them by the federal Stop Exploitation Through Trafficking Act of 2013.
State-level responses do seem to vary, though.
Yeah.
It's interesting seeing the different approaches and challenges. Florida, for example, seems to be taking proactive steps, a $4.9 million investment for shelters, increased punishment for traffickers. That's a clear commitment. However, our sources also highlight a deeply concerning situation in Nevada. While child prostitution is illegal there, Apparently, legal brothels in rural counties can be exploited to traffic children.
Wow.
And Las Vegas is identified by the FBI as one of the top cities for child prostitution. This stark contrast just shows how complex the issue is. Even with laws in place, loopholes or enforcement challenges can tragically undermine protection efforts.
It really does. And this brings us to a crucial topic: resilience and recovery from child sexual abuse. The research clearly reinforces that sustained adverse outcomes are not inevitable. This is incredibly important for survivors and for those who support them.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
We need to differentiate between resilience, which is more about being insulated from harm, managing to thrive despite trauma, and recovery, which is the active process of overcoming those initial adverse effects and healing. Our sources identify key protective factors that can really aid this journey. Things like supportive relationships with family, partners, professionals, engagement in education, and improved self-perception. Developing confidence in problem-solving, self-control, and for some, the vital role of faith or spirituality. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're concrete pathways to healing.
And these efforts are bolstered by the vital work of various opposition organizations on the ground, right? Groups like Worthwhile Wear, providing tangible support housing, vocational training for survivors, helping them rebuild.
Yes, crucial work.
Then there's Free the Captives, a Christian-based NGO focused on community education, prevention, reducing demand, pursuing legal remedies. These organizations are out there on the front lines every day, making a real difference.
Absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge that the journey to recovery, while possible, is often complex and nonlinear. Our sources note it can be re-triggered by specific situations like medical exams, childbirth, even legal proceedings. These can inadvertently re-traumatize survivors, which just underscores the critical need for truly trauma-informed, sensitive practices from all societal institutions involved in supporting survivors, making sure that the path to healing isn't inadvertently made more difficult. It's about recognizing that healing is a process, not really a destination, and that every single interaction matters.
So we've taken a deep dive today into human trafficking and child sexual abuse, peeling back some of the layers on these hidden crimes and their profound impacts on individuals, families, society. What really stands out to me is just the immense scale of the challenge and the complex vulnerabilities that allow these horrific abuses to happen, often within the very systems designed to protect people.
And this deep dive reveals not just that dark reality, but also the remarkable potential for resilience and recovery, and the absolutely critical role of informed, compassionate responses. Understanding the multifaceted nature of these issues, from the staggering economic cost to the deep personal scars, that really is the first crucial step toward meaningful change.
So what does this all mean for you listening? It truly raises an important question for all of us, I think. In a world where such profound suffering often remains unseen, hidden right here in plain sight, how can we as a society get better at identifying the subtle indicators of distress and vulnerability? How do we move from simply acknowledging the problem to actively supporting healing and prevention for every individual, especially the most vulnerable among us? It's a challenge that definitely calls for empathy, vigilance, and collective action.